What hunch do you have that they are aware of something that you didn't think they were until now through your work?
Yeah, so we have some really interesting examples of that. So I've worked with some fishermen in Hawaii. They're trap fishermen. So they'd fish with traps and they would go out every day and throw their old bait out of their traps. And the sharks would show up. So these sharks, as soon as they would get there, before they even started to pull their traps, the sharks would be gathering around their boat. So this fisherman was telling me it's really interesting. I could go out and he'd rev his engine, slow his boat down to pick up a trap. Sharks would be there. So he had a problem with his boat. It turns out his engine died. He had to replace his engine. So he went out as soon as his engine was replaced to the same spots and no sharks. So then it took about 2 or 3 weeks
Hmm.
before the sharks began to recognize it was his engine. So then I asked him, well, when you're out fishing, was there anybody else around you? And he said, yeah, there'd always be people. There was another group that would take people snorkeling a little while over. I said, well, they ever see sharks? He said, no. So I said, well, that's interesting. It sounds like the sharks could recognize the sound of your engine. And he's like, yeah, that's exactly what he thought it was. And when he changed engines, same boat, same practice, same place, sharks didn't recognize him. And of course, there were all these other boats around that were creating noise, but there wasn't a reward that came with the noise.
Right.
So what was interesting was the sharks had to relearn that there's a new sound that's now associated with I'm going to get a treat when this guy shows up.
Mhm.
So that's one. And then there's another. We were doing work on tiger sharks in Hawaii, and there's a group of tiger sharks at this one place that love to eat albatross chicks. So these albatross, they're massive birds, 6 foot wingspans, and the babies make their first flights over the water. Now, albatross are really cool birds. They can spend years out at sea. So these birds would get ready, they're flapping their wings, their pin feathers are gone, they've really got their full feathers, and they're getting ready to make their first flights. In this small lagoon, there would be 6 or 8 large tiger sharks
Those are massive.
waiting for those chicks to try to make their first flight. And if they hit the water, the sharks would just nail them and scarf them down. So we called it Thanksgiving. It was Tiger Shark Thanksgiving, scarfing down
Sea
albatross.
turkeys.
Exactly. So, but what was really cool was I would say within 2 days of the last bird fledging, sharks left and they were gone for the rest of the year. Now, what's really cool is that fledging season is amazingly predictable, like within a week. So the next year, all the sharks that we tagged that were there showed up exactly 1 week before the first bird fledged. All of them.
Wow. All of them, all the ones that you tagged.
Yeah. And then they would feed on those birds until the last bird left, and then off they would go. Some of those sharks went all the way down the main Hawaiian Islands. Some of them went all the way up to the northern part of the islands. But 1 week before that fledging season, they would be right back at that little lagoon. So think about it. Think about the ability to learn how to do that. Not all tiger sharks do this. Just some have learned how to do this. Some of them are better than others, but the clock in their head, how did they know?
So
How
precise.
do they exactly? So when you think about those things, they have, first of all, huge survival benefits, being able to retain and learn that information. But it really gives us insight into these animals aren't mindless by no means.
Hmm.
They're not these mindless eating machines. They're very picky and very conscientious eating machines.
Yeah, and they hone in very specifically on I like what do I know again, but very specifically on patterns that'll give them the maximum amount of return.
Yes, and they can learn that information really quickly, which is to me amazing, right? And the trick is how do we figure these things out? So that's always been the fun part for me is finding what tool or technology can we use to determine how quickly they can learn these things. And it's not like some little, shark array that you can keep in a tank in a lab and you can present it, train it to, identify shapes and things like that. Researchers have done that. And they learn very quickly. But what about something like a tiger shark or a white shark or a mako shark?